it declines.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Plugged In from YAA Electric. My name is Justin Fisher, YAA's electric vehicle expert, and today I'm joined again by the wonderful Justise. Justise, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. I wish I was sitting on the beach, but doing as well as I can otherwise.
Yeah, I'm coming to everyone live from Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, where I am big chillin'. My Ioniq 5 is getting a lot of attention because I've only seen a few Teslas around, but I don't think too many EVs make it out this way. And I can kind of see why. The infrastructure, if you don't have a Tesla, is severely lacking in my part of the world over here in North Carolina. The nearest Electrify America station was a good 130 miles away. But I mean, I've got 250 miles of range. I charged up at that station, got here just fine, and I plugged into the 110 wall outlet, and my car is doing fine. I'm back up to 80% state of charge from just plugging into the wall. So a lot of people don't think about how a lot of EV ownership is kind of like how you charge your phone, you know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of that. I mean, 110 though. The fact that you're getting that much out of 110, that's good.
Yeah, well, it took like 24 hours.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
good morning to everyone in the chat. Dwayne, Susanna, happy hippo. Wonderful to see you. Andrew, great to see everyone this morning. So today's headline is all about the difficulties that Americans are having with being convinced that EVs are the right for their next vehicle purchase. Now, I saw a recent AAA survey that says 25% of Americans plan to buy an EV for their next car. But I look at that and I wonder, what about the other 75%? Why don't they plan to go electric? And I mean, right off the bat, I know some of the common sense reasons. I mean, EVs are expensive. They cost 10,000 more than the average combustion vehicle. Charging is not the easiest thing in the world, et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to dig into the specific reasons that YAA's community members have cited for why they're not ready to go electric. Now, Justise, I think this is going to be a fun show with a lot of thought experiments and trying to see it from the other side, because you and I were both big EV advocates. I love driving electric. Personally, I find that any difficulties and hassles and extra planning that has to go into driving electric is always worth it, because I'm saving like $150 a month on fuel. That helps make up for my car payment. And I also just love driving electric. I love the fun acceleration, the quiet ride. Tell me about what makes it going electric totally worth it for you.
Well, for me, it definitely the quiet ride, less maintenance, the cheaper fuel costs. I'm also an early adopter, so the tech part of it is a big deal for me. I love that part of it. I get into that. I love tearing all that down. And for me, um, I'm probably in that other 25% in that I live in California and I have the infrastructure and I get it. Like I get that, you know, I it's easy for me. I can get whatever electric vehicle. There's a charger within 5 minutes of me, whatever kind of charger I need. So it's a little bit different there. I look at the rest of the nation and I get a little shocked at the lack of infrastructure outside of California.
Yes, for sure. Especially where I live in West Virginia, 6 hours from here. There's not a lot of infrastructure at all unless you have a Tesla. And even then, it's, superchargers here and there. But I still find it totally worth it and a great ownership experience. So let's dig in. I asked the YAA community a very important question on the forum. Two parts to this question. I said, what would it take for skeptics to go electric? Got plenty of responses. They've been really interesting. And number two, if cost wasn't an issue, which EV would you buy today? I didn't get a lot of feedback on that one, but still, I'm seeing a lot of love for Tesla. But we're seeing more diverse responses these days. People love the Taycan. The people love the Ioniq 5, the EV6. They think a lot about charging speed. But let's dig into what these responses shared the most. Out of the 25 or so responses and replies that we had on the community post, 5 of them mentioned high EV prices. No surprise there. Another 5 mentioned infrastructure, where to charge. And then we had range. A few people mentioned range. I thought it would be more. And then one person who's an enthusiast, an automotive enthusiast, did say that they are not too happy with the lack of emotion, the lack of sound coming from EVs. That's not a problem for me at all. But let's hit on these first two concerns that our members have had: EV prices and where to charge. Because right now, the average electric vehicle sells for about $66,000. That's $10,000 to $11,000 more than the average new vehicle price right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Justice. I've got my stats right, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So EVs are more expensive. Now that does not take into consideration EV incentives, with which for most automakers, you still get the $7,500 federal EV tax credit here in the United States. But 3 out of 4 EV buyers chooses a Tesla, and Tesla no longer qualifies unless there's a revision to the tax credit. Why? Because Tesla has been so popular and they've sold over 200,000 EVs. They passed that milestone, what, in like 2017, 2018?
Yeah. That was a long time ago. But
Yeah.
more and more OEMs are getting phased out of that too, though.
And we can't forget that state EV incentives are a big part of the equation for many consumers. Not where I live and not where I'm at right now in North Carolina, but still, that's a part of the equation. Regardless, when it comes to writing a check or signing up for financing in the F&I office, a lot of EV buyers are staring down at a sheet that shows that they're going to be, signing up to pay upwards of 50, 60, $70,000 to drive electric. And I can understand why that's not okay for a large portion of drivers. Justice, what are your thoughts on EV affordability? Do you think it's going to get better anytime soon?
Well, it depends on the definition of soon. I think by 2024, we're going to start seeing some good sub $40,000 EVs, even possibly some 30s. I know BYD's were and Kia are both working on $20,000 EVs, but for the European market. So we'll see how long that takes to get over here. But I think there's a lot of competition coming, and obviously competition is gonna drive prices down, technology up, and solve some of these issues. But I think what you'll see is a cheaper EV with less range. I think
Yeah.
that's what's coming. I think you're going to see the 200-mile range between 2 and 300 for the cheaper vehicles. I don't think you'll see over 300 on them.
Yeah, and if infrastructure was on par with like what you have in, say, California, a cheaper EV with lower range would be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you could do that in California, no problem. I mean, there's no dead spots between me up here in Northern California and say Mario down in San Diego. You can drive and you would never have any problem stopping, getting a recharge, and going. So an 8-hour drive, easy, no problem. 600 miles, you could pop off and recharge. Now, where you're at, I don't think that's a realistic possibility.
No, no, where I'm at is a tough situation. However, I just every time I get in my car and I get to ride around silently, well, in reality, I'm listening to the music I love at really, really great quality that I'm not used to in a car because you're used to listening to engine noise and more road noise. The Ionic 5 that I drive, not only is it quiet because it's powered by electric motors, it also has great insulation. And I just love that whole experience. But I find the struggles that come along with charging to be worth it when it comes to how much I love the vehicle. So that's just a personal situation based on my priorities, but I totally get why, especially in a state like where I live, West Virginia, most people are not even thinking about going electric because there are not many chargers. So I get it, totally get it.
Now,
The national, what's that?
I think I did a comparison with you a little while ago. I did your state and the 4 surrounding states, and we have more chargers in Sacramento than those 5 states. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
think that's a
wild.
really big difference, and I look at those and I go, "Okay, so, I get the hesitation there from people because if the infrastructure is not there, then you don't wanna be dead on the side of the road because you can't just grab a gas can and come back to your car. There's some specialty things you need if you die on the side of the road."
Yes, it is wild. I mean, we've also got the national EV charging network that is progressing. I'm actually surprised by how quickly this program is progressing through the federal bureaucracy to get funding allocated from $7.5 billion that the bipartisan infrastructure bill included for EV charging, to get that funding allocated to the states, and also to get private partnerships involved to bring 500,000 chargers to America with prioritization along interstates. Now, that to me could be a real game changer, because even where I live in West Virginia, most people travel on I-77, I-64, and the other interstates to get to where they need to go, because the mountain roads are just so small and windy. And, as the bird flies, you might go 30 miles, right? But as the road drives in my state, it might be 50 miles. So I look forward to seeing how the national EV charging network along interstates could really transform EV viability for many Americans.
Well,
Um,
and Tesla's saying they're gonna open up their network by the end of this year to
Yes. No.
everybody.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I just saw some updates for V4 version 4 Tesla superchargers. Some of the blueprints were kind of not leaked, but they were made publicly available because of mandatory regulatory filings and stuff. But yeah, Justice, let's talk about that, because it looks like Tesla is going to bring CCS, the other, other than Tesla's connector, the other popular connector used in every EV except the Nissan Leaf, to their superchargers. And that would that would be a massive leap forward in charging infrastructure. It almost makes you wonder, do we even need a national charging network if Tesla does that?
Well, so as a former Tesla owner, I would say yes, you do, because I enjoyed being able to pull in and charge right away without sitting in line because there's 100 Ionic 5s and Rivians and
Yeah.
ES6s sitting in my spots.
Yep.
So I think what you're going to see is a lot of people, cheering for that and getting great infrastructure, and then a lot of Tesla owners being a little bit salty that they have to wait behind all these other EVs to get their vehicle charged.
Totally. I would still go to Electrify America when possible, because I don't want to be dealing with dirty looks from Tesla drivers at the supercharger stations. And honestly, I love Electrify America, but I've been thinking I need to do like a deep dive investigative journalism piece to see why Electrify America has so many reliability issues, because the stations seem pretty modern and awesome, and they've got great touch screens, and like they look pretty fancy. But when it comes down to it, I would say 1 out of 5 charging sessions, the session is interrupted and I've got to like unplug and plug back in. It's stuff that you don't have to do at the gas station. I wonder how much of that is because of my car, but I also know it happens to other cars and other brands and models at Electrify America. I want to find out why Electrify America has so many problems that Tesla doesn't have. Do you have any insights that you might be able to share with us?
I don't know why, but I have heard from everybody I talk to around that I know has EVs that that is a real problem.
Oh, yeah.
I approach people with EVs all the time. I talk to them. I'm an enthusiast. I know lots of people who drive them, and the non-Tesla owners, that is like their number one complaint, even here in California, is uh, that they have such a problem with the charging. And I question that with the national EV or the charging network. What are they putting in? How
Yeah.
reliable are those 500,000 going to be? You can have 500,000, but if 200,000 of them aren't working, then, what's the point?
Yeah. Oh, that's getting me stressed out just thinking about it. We've got some good comments in the chat. Walter says they have a Leaf, a Nissan Leaf. They're retired and haven't bought gas in 5 weeks. That is awesome, Walter.
Right.
Now, sad news, at least sad in my opinion, is that Nissan is rumored to be killing off the Nissan Leaf after let's see, 11 years on the US market. It was the first mass-produced EV in the US. The Tesla Roadster was first, but that was very expensive and in limited production. So we're all sad to hear that the Leaf might be on its way out, but it's sad to me because it's the second most affordable EV in the US, and in some cases the most affordable, depending on how bad the markups are for the Chevy Bolt. But I think Nissan is going to bring back the Leaf. I don't think they're really killing it off. They're going to, I'm trying to remember what other vehicle they did this with, but they're going to kill it off for like 2 years and then bring it back with 300 miles of range, fast charging. It'll look completely different. Automakers do that from time to time. Is it the Acura Integra that I'm thinking about? Maybe. I don't know.
They do that all the time. I mean,
They do that all the time.
they bring it. Look at the Charger and the Challenger, right? They were
Yes.
dead for decades, and then they brought them back, and they were super popular.
Yeah, so I don't think we're saying goodbye to the Leaf forever. I mean, it has such a legacy at this point, but I'm glad that you're able to save on your fuel month to month by driving a Leaf. Now, other comments we've had in here is there's a bit of a debate going on over here on the YouTube chat about whether or not Tesla will be still holding high market share, say 5 or 10 years from now. Here's the thing: Tesla's number of sales is likely to stay high and increase. I'm very confident that Tesla's number of vehicles sold will continue to increase throughout the decade and probably beyond that. But market share will decrease, or the rest of automakers are just going to go bankrupt. So it's one or the other, because they're all committing to electrification. They're all saying that, 2030,
There's
2035.
no way. Yeah, there's no way Tesla doesn't lose market share. Of course.
Yeah, we
When
kind of
you're
want them
the
to.
only people on the block, basically, and then other people move in, of course your market share is going to go down. That
Yeah, I mean, Tesla started this. They really did. They showed that EVs are, would you say, like, they're not bad for business. A
yeah,
lot of automakers, we heard it from GM's executives for years and years. They were saying that Tesla is going to fall, they're going to fail, they're going to go bankrupt. But here they are, the number one EV seller by a large margin. And I recently asked the one and only Ray Shefska from here at YAA. We love Ray. I asked him, what has surprised you most about the electrification of the auto industry in the past few years? And he said he was surprised by how well Tesla has done. And honestly, considering what all the industry talking heads were saying 5 years ago, I can see how that could be surprising to Ray, because that was kind of the main theme among legacy automakers, was that Tesla is got their days numbered, they're on their way out. But here we are, and 66% of EV buyers in the United States are still choosing a Tesla model. Their sales continue to increase. For example, at the time where Tesla increased their sales of the Model 3 and Model Y by a lot, the Volkswagen ID4's sales dropped by 60% because of supply chain issues. So it's not just about what do consumers want, it's about who can make the cars that consumers want. And Tesla has shown that's another one of their strengths. And do you miss your Model 3, Justice?
oh, I miss it every day. I miss that every day. I'm still trying to. Right now, I'm waiting out the Cybertruck, but every day I'm like, look, if it doesn't come, I just need to get something. I need to get something. Um, but I will tell you, all those CEOs uh, were almost right several different times.
Yeah.
Tesla has flirted with going belly up several times. I know there was a point, the big one, in what 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, when Tesla almost went, and Elon literally put every cent he had into the company and was sleeping on the floor in his office, and trying to get that through. Tesla's has had some bumps, and these other OEMs, if they're not careful about it, they may not make it through those bumps. It takes a lot of dedication from a very good team. I mentioned Elon, but obviously it's the whole Tesla team, the president and everybody else down to the floor, that really saved Tesla so many times. So
Yeah.
it's going to depend on how committed these OEMs are to it, and if they can take those slumps and supply chain issues and keep going.
Yeah. Now, I want to get back to our main theme here today. So, what were the reasons cited for why 75% of Americans don't plan to buy an EV for their next car purchase? So, about half of the respondents did mention pricing as a reason for their hesitancy. Let's talk about what the most affordable EVs are in the United States right now and what they offer. And I want to make sure we talk about what are their capabilities, because sure, there's some $30,000 EVs on the market if you can find them without markups, but they're not as capable as some of the more expensive options. Justice, can you share with us what a few of the more affordable EV options are in 2022?
That'd be what Chevy Bolt, I think, is the number one, right?
Yes, the
Um,
Bolt officially, I can't even say officially because of these markups, but it starts at 26,000 for the 2023 model, and GM has controversially made that retroactive for those who have bought a Bolt in recent months. So technically, it starts at 26,000, but if you look at car listings or YAA car search, you're hard pressed to find one for under 30,000 because of dealer markups.
yeah, I mean, dealer markets are going to pretty much for all of these dealer markups are going to be a pretty big thing. But then you got what the Mazda MX30. I think is
Yeah,
it?
I like blocked that out from my mind. I think you even had a test driving experience with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was not my
Tell-
favorite vehicle.
Yeah, since I don't live in
Um,
California, I haven't had the chance to actually experience the Mazda MX-30. Briefly, tell us what your thoughts were and what the experience was like.
it just so not to sound like the ICE people who say EVs have no soul, but if you were looking for that, the MX30 is it. There was no there was no soul to it. It felt kind of cheap and plasticky inside. There was no real. I mean, like what we like the EVs for that torque, right? That get up and go. Well, the MX30 meandered more than it went up and went. Um, if that's what I could afford and there was no markup on it, sure, I would go for that over another ICE vehicle. But of all the EVs I've driven, that was the most sort of lackluster of all the ones that I've driven so far.
Yeah, and I got to mention that it gets 100 miles of US EPA rated range. That is
Yeah,
ridiculous. So that's only good for like zipping around downtown.
yeah,
It starts at 33,000 and some change. But wow, just 100 miles of range. You can't go on any road trips. And if you did, you'd have to be like sleeping in the car at all the charging stations. So let's just move on from the Mazda
yeah.
MX-30. That's not a good example of an affordable EV. The Chevy Bolt, though, is quite popular. It can get you 250 miles roughly on a charge. Charging speeds are a bit slower. So 55 kilowatt max charging speed with the Chevy Bolt, even though it's a 2022, 2023 model, it still has the same charging speed as you would find 5 years ago. But we got to say the affordability is appreciated. Thank you, GM, for keeping an EV under 30,000. But you got to get a hold on these dealer markups because they're really killing the affordable EV scene. Another one, the Nissan Leaf. Nissan says it's on its way out. They're going to supposedly replace it with another affordable EV. I'd imagine it would be more crossover like because that's what three-quarters of buyers want these days. But the Chevy Bolt, I'm sorry, the Nissan Leaf does start around $30,000, but the extended range option will be more like 35,000 and upwards to 40,000 for the fully loaded Leaf trims. But then you've got two that I think are really, really underestimated. It's the Hyundai Kona Electric and the Kia Niro Electric.
Yep.
I believe the Kia starts quite a bit lower than the Hyundai, around $35,000. The Hyundai Kona EV is more like 40,000. But these are some of the most efficient EVs on the
I think
market.
that's flipped.
It's
I think the
flipped.
Kona is 35 and the Nero is just over 40.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. In the 35 to $40,000 price range. But what is interesting to me is that if you're going into EVs for the environmental concerns, which we'll talk about, like the effects of battery mining and all that, that is a concern that a few people shared, and it's a justified concern. Um, my background is in environmental science myself, so I'm aware that EV battery mining is not great for the planet, but we'll talk about that. If you're thinking about efficiency and going the most miles with the smallest battery and the smallest environmental impact, honestly, the Kona Electric and e-Niro are two great options for those thinking about the environment, and they can be had for around $40,000 or less. So that's a good option to consider. We had a great comment in the chat. Thank you so much for reminding me that Volkswagen has some breaking news. Justice, have you seen about the ID4's latest news?
I don't think so.
Yeah, Volkswagen, first of all, they have already started this week production of the ID4 at the Chattanooga, Tennessee plant. So we have a new American made EV, and that's big news. A lot of people like to buy American made. That's another good thing you can do for the environment, considering that my Ioniq 5 did sit on a massive boat for like a month to get to America, and I don't feel too good about that. But yeah, Volkswagen announced that they're going to also be offering a more affordable ID4 trim for 2023, made in America in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's going to have roughly 200 miles of range. Charging speed should still be around 135 kilowatts, which is what the regular ID4 has. But $35,000 and it qualifies for incentives, that could be a good deal. I mean, I would really recommend that to people. I've test driven plenty of ID4s and I do love them. I hope they find a fix to the laggy infotainment screen. That was the only thing besides the somewhat slower charging speed that I wasn't okay with. I mean, imagine thinking about how often I use the infotainment screen in my Ioniq 5. I'm using it all the time. I can't imagine swiping and then it takes 5 seconds for it to actually do it.
I think
That and the charging speed.
that's going to be a really big deal. The infotainment systems, like when people talk about reliability, I know we covered that on the Ray and Zach show on the channel before. So much of it is uh, they got dinged down on reliability because of the screen. Because all these auto manufacturers are trying to put their own software and develop their own apps, and they forget that that's not what they do for a living. They're not very good at it. So you have these clunky sort of infotainment screens. I think Apple has it right. Apple's sort of out there now talking to everybody. I know um, Cook was talking to the CEO of Rivian last week. I'm hanging out with them. And I know people speculated Apple's going to buy Rivian, but I think what they're really doing is trying to say, hey, use Apple CarPlay as your navigation, put it in there. As Apple said, I think that could be the way forward for a lot of these OEMs is get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay to run all of these infotainment screens, and I think you would see a lot happier people. Because there's a lot of these screens, even in the Kona, which I drove. It was really
Yeah.
very buggy, and I
Yeah.
was not happy with it. I was like, we can tell a quarter of a second difference
Yes.
when we're
Yes.
pressing on stuff. We
And
really can. So,
especially if you're like me and you've had plenty of experience in a Tesla, it's like it really stands out if you've experienced Tesla and then you experience the ID4's infotainment system. It's like no bueno, no bueno.
yeah, yeah, Tesla's got it right so far. Although even Tesla owners are like, I want CarPlay.
Yeah, I mean, my Ioniq 5 has it, but I don't even use it, so I'm not one of those people. But
I wasn't either. I never. I have Bluetooth. That's fine.
yeah,
But I know it's a big deal for a lot of people.
yep. Range is another thing brought up by those who are concerned about EV adoption and say they're not ready to go electric. This is no surprise, but I do want to point out that cost and charging infrastructure were far more, they were a lot higher on the list for concerns that people have about switching to electric. So range was quite a bit further down in third place. Only a few people mentioned range. And I think that's interesting because isn't that a bit of a shift from what we would have seen 5, 6, 7 years ago when range would have been what most people thought of when they think about switching to EVs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you remember when the Roadster first came out. Elon did a cross country trip in the Roadster to prove because everyone said it wasn't viable. You can't do an EV. You can't go anywhere. So he himself popped it before anyone knew who he was. He popped in the Roadster and drove like from San Francisco to New York and back just to prove that you can get across country in an EV. So we've come a long way from that you had to prove range that it was possible to now that's sort of lower down on the list. And I think as time goes on, people realize how much they don't drive.
Yeah.
'Cause most people think, oh, 200 miles, I can't do that. I'm like, well, you really drive probably about 30, 40 miles a day, most
Hmm.
people. So it's not really that big of a deal.
And I would say that I was surprised no one was really mentioning charging speed. Well, I guess we had a few mention charging
Yeah.
speed because, in my opinion, that is, as an EV owner myself, that is way more important than even range because I mostly charge at home. 90% of EV charging is done at home. You just plug in, even if you don't have a garage. I don't park mine in the garage. I just park it on the driveway, plug in. I don't even have a level 2 charger. I have just trickle charge from the wall, and it's good enough for my daily driving needs. But when I do travel, it takes about 20 minutes to go from 10% to 85%. If I really want to go from 10% to 95%, I might be there for 30 minutes because as you get towards the top of the battery pack, battery management slows it down, makes sure the energy is distributed in a way that thermal runaway, aka overheating, is not going to happen. But for me and for my family, 20 to 25 minutes at a charger, that's perfect. I mean, it's once every 200 miles or so. That's not a problem for us on a road trip. But I could see how many families, especially for those with kids, would not want to sit around at a charger for 50 minutes. That would be a real pain if you've got a crying toddler in the back seat. So, in my opinion, that's another very justified concern that skeptics have. I do want to point out that this year and next year, with GM's Ultium battery platform bringing more affordable fast charging options to the market, such as the Equinox EV, things are changing quickly. And I think charging speed is not going to be not going to be a good excuse in 1 or 2 years' time because there will be more options on the market that charge quickly. That's how I see it.
Well, and if you look at charging speeds over the last 5 years, even with Tesla, from what they've done, um, you know, continue the trajectory there, and it will be eventually that you'll get from 10% to 90% in 10 minutes. I'm thinking 10 years that'll be easy. Like it won't be nearly as big of a deal. So and at those points, range matters less. You're
Yeah.
just pulling over for 10 minutes to stretch your legs every 200 miles. Okay, so you 10 minutes, you go into the convenience store, you use the restroom, you buy your drink so you can use the restroom again in 200 miles, and you're good to go. I see that within much less than 10 years, I think.
Yeah, that is true. And one more thing I want to talk about before we wrap up the show with some news that we've learned about this week from various automakers, EV news, the effects of battery mining on the environmental impacts of vehicle production, because we have seen that brought up as a concern, not only from two people in our responses on YAA's community forum, but also here in the chat. We've had a few people bring it up, and it's something that I thought a lot about before I purchased an EV because I myself, I mean, I have a master's in environmental science, so I was basically heavy in the books, reading about all these things for a few years. And what I can say is that it depends on how much you drive. And you've also got to consider this. There is a conscious effort going on right now to clean up the battery supply chain. So this is a big difference between like just committing to oil for the rest of your driving career, the next 50 years of or however long you're going to be driving. There's a difference between just accepting oil and fossil fuel drilling and resource extraction, and then understanding that yes, battery mining has negative impacts on the environment, but we are currently working hard to find ways to make those impacts less and less severe. For example, cobalt-free batteries are under advanced development right now and making their way into some batteries. Not only the specifics of mining and making the whole mining process better for the people who work in the mines and the environment, but also making the batteries more efficient. That's a huge part of it. And we're going to see that, especially when solid state batteries make it to market later this decade, post 2025. Energy density means that if you have the same size battery with the same amount of rare earth minerals, you're going to go more miles with the same size battery. And that's going to mean that, in theory, the environmental impact of each EV produced would be lower. This is going to happen incrementally. It's not going to happen overnight. But the studies show when it comes to environmental impacts, you're looking at between 2 and 5 years of EV ownership to break even when it comes to environmental costs, depending on how much you drive. So I drive a lot. I calculated that for our family. After about 2 to 3 years of driving, we'll be driving better for the environment than we would have in our Subaru Forester for the rest of our ownership cycle. Depends on how many miles you drive, which EV you bought. So if you're driving a Hummer EV that weighs 9,000 pounds and has a 230 kilowatt hour battery, that's not going to be very good for the environment. But if you're driving, a more normal sized EV and powering it through the electric grid that has, at least 20% renewable energy, which is the average in the United States right now, you could be looking at an environmental break-even time in 2 to 5 years. Is this something you've thought about, Justice, living in California, where you get 25-30% of your grid's power from just solar energy alone?
Yeah, we're 99.87% renewable in
Yeah,
California.
that's hard
We're
to
in,
do.
so yeah, I mean, we have our struggles, but we had our struggles before that too. Obviously we
Yeah,
had rolling brownouts for my entire existence in California, so it's over 30 years. Um, but there's something that I think about. I'm not as much into that side of it as you are, but I think it's something you definitely have to take into account.
yeah,
Um, Beyond the efficiency and better mining, I also think that recycling the batteries
that's a
is going to
huge
be
thing.
a bigger thing. And the number one thing I'm hearing rumbling around here in Sacramento is uh, using those batteries in stationary, either in home or hopefully at power plants. Taking the batteries, because in a stationary application, they're still very useful. You don't have quite the same charging uh, restrictions there. And if you're recycling them to be stationary batteries at power plants that can hold the electricity, you get a lot of use out of them for a long time. It's a good recycling then, and you really relieve a lot of pressure on the grid. And that's
Yeah,
and that's my focus right now is everything that I've read and listened to some of the experts in is we don't need to produce any more electricity than we already do to transfer everything to EV. You just need to be able to store the electricity that we make because
yes.
most of it gets lost. We don't have we have never stored it, so it just sort of goes off into the ether. So using these batteries, maybe at power plants, to store electricity would be, I think, a game changer and make the environmental impact of those batteries a whole lot less.
Yes. Estimates are that grid battery storage will be an industry worth $15 billion annually in just 3 years' time, and then upwards of $100 billion by the end of this decade. Because, as you've pointed out, I mean, that's kind of the solution to the problems that we're talking about is grid battery storage. Because if you've got plenty of solar energy, the sun's shining, what about at night, right? Well, if you have grid scale battery storage, you can use solar energy at night. But let's be clear, if everyone switched to EVs in 2022 or even in the next year and a half or 2 years, the grid could not handle that because it's a massive shift in when peak demand would be occurring. Normally, peak demand is in the afternoon when people are getting off work and some factories and facilities are still operating. But if everyone goes electric, there's going to be a lot more demand on the grid in the middle of the night because 90% of charging is at home while you're sleeping. You just plug in your car and forget about it. So it's true that the grid has some planning and figuring out to do. But as we've seen, I mean, EV market share right now is 5.6% in the United States. I personally think it might reach 35% by 2030 because so many Americans are going to be waiting as long as they can to switch. Um, I think the grid's going to have plenty of time to adjust and adapt to the situation. And we also got to remember that we talk a lot about battery prices, $100 per kilowatt hour. Battery prices are also going to be going down for the electrical grid purposes too. So we're going to see more battery storage on the grid, and that's going to help all of us. Hopefully, I mean, it's totally possible that I could be wrong and things are going to just be horrible and miserable 5 years from now. But I'd like to think that innovation will lead the way. Igor had a great comment in the chat saying the next few years will be very interesting and lots of innovation will be happening. We cannot forget that the electrification of the auto industry is just getting started. Innovation is accelerating. Things are going to change. Things are going to get better when it comes to EV efficiency, battery production and battery supply chains, all of the above, and even the electrical grid, which is a whole other topic that we don't deal with here at YAA. But innovation has the power to kind of save the day, since obviously no one's running out and buying EVs in 2022 because they're too expensive and there's not enough chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I think innovation started out with Tesla and then has gotten so much better. And as more competition comes through, you're going to see a huge leap in innovation because they're going to start having to one up each other and price down each other. So it's going to be an exciting time to watch. Just those of us with no patience want it to hurry up and happen now.
Yeah. A few comments in the chat that I want to mention, and then I'm going to quickly breeze through some news, and then we'll call it a day. Because I know we've got the Ray and Zach show coming up in just 15 minutes. So when you're done with YA Electric's wonderful plugged in episode, head right on over to Ray and Zach, where they're going to be talking about who knows what. So Phil in the chat says, got his Lightning Pro yesterday. That is awesome. I have still not seen F-150 Lightning at all. I've been looking for them at every Electrify America station. I'm jealous. Learning fast. When do I think that EV market share will hit 15%? Crystal ball. Honestly, I think 15% is going to come pretty fast. I think moving beyond 35% is going to be where it's going to slow down in the United States because we don't have the European mindset. We're just, we're our own thing on this side of the pond. So I personally think EV market share in the United States will come right around 2025. That's pretty fast if you think about it. Maybe even 2024. You know what? I'm going to say, let's write this down. I'm going to write it down. Summer 2024. That is when I think the United States will hit 15% market share. We do have all of the latest second quarter EV market share and sales numbers from US sales on our EV market share and sales guide over at joinyaa.com. So I'll link that down in the chat. Down in the comments. Fascinating numbers. Just imagine if supply chain constraints weren't there, EV sales would be really through the roof from everything we're seeing. Let's see, other comments we could address real quick. I guess that's about it for now because we've got some news to share and then we'll wrap this up. So yeah, Hyundai is going to be bringing a $20,000 EV to Europe. It's not coming here. And Justise, I wanted your take on this. Why aren't they bringing affordable EVs to America? Is it because nobody's going to buy them? Are they too compact and small for the American buyer? Do we not have those narrow European streets that they're made for?
I think part of it is design. Absolutely. I think Americans really want that design, and also that they are smaller. Americans they don't want the subcompact, compact vehicles. They want the crossovers and the SUVs and the trucks. That's what Americans want to buy. Also think, there's imports and other things to consider, that it's easier just to ship over to Europe. There's a lot of constraints there, but I think overall it's Americans want SUVs and trucks and everybody knows it. So if that's not what you're selling, it's not really worth going through the hassle of building them and shipping them over.
Yeah. And this reminds me that the average monthly car payment is now $730. a new record. That is unbelievable. $730 average car payment in the United States. So we need more affordable EVs. Some other news, the Porsche Taycan, or Porsche, outsells the 911, but now they say they're going to build a long-range electric crossover positioned above the Cayenne and Macan. So I don't think this is going to be anywhere near affordable, but still, Porsche is really going deeper into the EV space, and I think they're going to continue that trajectory.
And you don't think affordability when you think Porsche already,
No,
anyway. So
I don't even know why I
I don't
brought it
think
up.
that's going to be. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a concern for their customer base.
I just think it's a cool car. So yeah. And then
Yeah.
the Celestiq from Cadillac will be unveiled this Friday. You know, we're not talking about affordability because the rumor is it's going to start at about $300,000. Now, why did I even bring this up? Because Cadillac and GM, they're saying that they're going to bring back their famous slogan, the standard of the world, for the Celestiq, which means they're really going after Rolls-Royce. And I just can't help but wonder if this is a mistake. I hope that the Celestiq is awesome, because it's going to be powered by the Ultium electric platform. They're rumored over 500 miles of range, which I'd say it better have for $300,000.
Yeah, the
Lots
Lucid
and
gets
lots.
600. So
Yeah. It's going to have lots of 3D printed parts. That's interesting. Haven't seen that too much. But yeah, the Celestiq, I'll see what they say on Friday when Cadillac unveils it. It's also going to have Ultra Cruise, which is GM's successor to Super Cruise, the somewhat autonomous driving technology that is good for highways. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
yeah,
All right, we'll wrap
get
this
out
up.
and test drive one of those.
Yes, for sure. We'll wrap this up, everyone. Be sure to head over to the Ray and Zach channel coming up here in 13 minutes. We had a bit of a long show today, but it was great. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me or Justise. I'm at justin@joinyaa.com. Justise, you're at justice@joinyaa.com.
With an S.
Yes.
At joinyaa.com.
The Justin and Justise show. But thank you so much. And yeah, I'll be over there, Ray and Zach, in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. And check us out on Instagram, where we'll be posting the latest EV news. I'm about to head over there myself. Have a great day, everyone. Please like and subscribe. Bye-bye.